So good morning again, everybody. I'm going to introduce our presenter today, Graham Hughes, who is Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Accelerator, and here to tell us more today about zoning as a climate solution and how this could relate to the work that we do in our communities. So Graham, I'm going to make you a co-host now in case you need to share anything or need any of those functions, and you can take it away.
Thanks, Brady. It says screen sharing is still not turned on. There we go. Got it. Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Graham. Like Brady said, I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Accelerator today. Well, I've been in this position for about 3 months, 3.5 months or so. I'm going to do a short presentation today as soon as I figure out the screen sharing bit on zoning and climate change. And this is really just like a primer, so to speak. You know, we only have about 20 minutes today, and I'm not really an expert on zoning policy, at least not yet. So I'm going to do my best to just share what I do know about zoning with you all, and we'll have a conversation. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. All right. So when you think about your community in the future, you know, it's a community that has dealt with the effects of climate change, mitigated its greenhouse gas production to the best of its ability, and has fully adapted to the new world, you know, maybe 20, 30, 50 years from now, or even tomorrow. What does it look like to you?
For me, I think about a lot more people walking, biking, getting around in other ways besides just driving a car by themselves.
Walking and biking. Love it. Thanks, Brady.
I think of a world which is a lot less noisy and a lot less smelly.
Mm, less noisy and smelly. That would be nice. Yeah, go ahead.
I think in addition to the things that have been mentioned, kind of denser um, communities, particularly in Rochester itself, and an improved connection to the lake is something I think Rochester would really benefit from. It's tricky geographically to a degree, but I think that would be great. But also a better connection and access to the Genesee River. So I like your photo of the ferry boat here on the river there. It's nice.
Yes, it is. Thank you. We'll take one. Yeah, go ahead.
I think about, in addition, um, most, if not all, of our food being grown and sourced locally.
Definitely. Last call. Anybody want to share their vision of a future?
I just want to throw in less packaging in the grocery store. That's my vision.
Definitely. Yes, I agree. Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Racially mixed communities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate those thoughts and those visions. They're inspiring, but they're also deeply connected, at least most of them. I don't know about getting rid of plastic and packaging in the grocery stores, but most of them are connected directly to zoning and land use issues. Just to define it very briefly, zoning and land use policy, they're the rules that we make about what kind of things can go where in our communities. So where housing can go, where commercial and industrial spaces can go, where green space, agricultural space, energy projects, where they can all go, how they all fit together, and in our, you know, in the geographic space that we inhabit. The rules that we make to determine all of that is zoning and land use policy. So this is the town of Penfield zoning map, and I picked Penfield because I was just in Fairport and Penfield last week. What do you see when you see Penfield, the zoning map of Penfield? And I don't know if you can read the little legend here, but very quickly, green is commercial space, red are special districts, orange is industrial, blue is manufactured homes, pink is multiple residences, and then everything that is white outlined in red is single family residential. So what do you all see?
They really just restricted everything that is not single family residential.
Yeah. Anyone else?
It looks pretty white. Is there nothing agricultural in Penfield?
I think there might be some. It's hard for me to
Not for
tell.
long.
Yeah.
Are there any mixed
There's a couple. These pink areas way down at the bottom here. You can see the mixed residential, and then there's another section right in the middle down at the bottom, and then there's a couple of them way up at the top in the left-hand corner.
Those are multiple residential, but the mixed use development is new. That is brand new, never been, it's kind of central. It's relatively big right in the middle.
So
MUD.
what's in the special districts?
Special districts. So that's see if I can find them. That's
I mean,
these.
what is special? What is considered special?
Well, I think special probably means mixed use of some kind, or it has special allotments. I'm not 100% sure. But I think it does seem that this map is from 2017. This is the one I found published on their website though.
I see there's no, I think someone mentioned this, but no like farming preferred or agricultural or anything designated for rec or parks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Sunscape Farms and Bauman's. I don't
Yeah,
see
I'm
them.
not sure where those are or why they're not showing up as zoned for that.
Yeah, there's at least a description. RA-2 is rural agriculture.
Ah, thank you.
Oh yeah, so it's a big chunk. It's most of East
All
Penfield.
here, right
Yeah.
here. It's this big section right here. But you can see all of the R1, anything that's R or RR-1. So all of these plots here. All right, we're gonna move on to the next one, which is the town of Greece. What do we all see in the map for the town of Greece? And it just generally anything that's yellow and designated R1 is single family residential. Emily again said in the chat, too many single family. Any other thoughts?
I mean, what a general observation, which is by no means novel, is that this development pattern inevitably means that to do the things you need to do during the course of a day, if you are in a single family residential area, you essentially need to drive by having the commercial and business districts so concentrated on certain corridors or scattered around. So obviously that's problematic for a number of reasons.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Matt. Well, to me, they look very similar, Greece and Penfield. The concentration in little spots of commercial or industrial development and the dominance of single family zoning. And that's kind of the story of zoning in the suburbs and the suburban areas of our community, but also the suburban areas of most other communities around the country, so that single family homes just dominate. And, you know, I grew up in one of those communities. I grew up outside of Syracuse in a suburb, and it was a really wonderful childhood that I had. I went to great schools. I had great friends in a great neighborhood. We lived down the street from a woods that created wonderful opportunities for me to like interact with and just live and play in the natural world. So I have really fond memories of growing up in that kind of community. But the reality is that the dominance of these types of communities, where low density zoning dominates and single family homes become the norm, is that it's pretty bad for the climate. Like Matt was just saying, in this type of zoning and in this type of community, cars become absolutely necessary. Which means more traffic, more vehicle miles traveled. They're necessary because people, to get from your home to anywhere else you need to go is kind of a long trip. It's usually at least a couple miles. And so having a car becomes an absolute necessity. Single family housing is also a lot more energy intensive than other types of housing, because many of them are so big and take up so much space. Just takes a lot more energy to heat and cool them. Also in the construction process, it just, it's one unit for one family. As opposed to a smaller unit that's part of a bigger building. Just takes a lot more materials and energy to actually construct these homes. So having and it leads to less diversity of housing options, which means that unless you have the money or the resources or the opportunity to buy a home in one of these communities, it's going to be pretty hard for you to live there. And it just means, more space is needed to house people, which leads to less space for green space, agricultural land, and all sorts of other uses of land. Those maps that we just saw, the incredible amount of space that those neighborhoods take up, because they're large parcels with large homes. They just take up all this space, and that takes away, space that we could be using for other things. So all of these things ultimately lead to higher greenhouse gas production than alternative or different forms of communities, differently zoned communities. And I'm just going to, just share a possible framework for what we do about this. Because I don't think that it's really possible to totally change all of these neighborhoods and all of our suburban communities across Rochester, nor do I think it's what people would want. But I do think what we can do is think about the growth that we're going to have in the future and approach it from a perspective of smart growth. Sure, we're going to need to change the zoning codes in some of these suburban neighborhoods, but definitely not all of them. What we can do, though, is follow smart growth, which in essence says you should invest your growth in urban or semi-urban centers. Following these kind of principles here that lead to more dense housing and varied housing options, that enable different transportation choices, that create more walkable places like this beautiful marketplace over on the right-hand side over here. To me, that's what we should be focusing on, is taking the energy and the resources that we're going to put towards growing our communities and changing the way that we do that in certain pockets. So what does this look like in practice? What is more dense? What does investing in density in housing mean? Well, first it means having more dense housing enables the construction of housing that is quote unquote more naturally affordable. People talk about this idea of missing middle housing. Basically, if you have more dense housing, and not like huge apartment buildings, but condos, 4-unit buildings, duplexes, the cost of creating those housing units is less per unit than it would be for a single family home. So this fills the gap in our community that exists of missing middle housing, for people that make, I think Bill Price last week was talking about it as people that make just about or over $75,000. So it fills a need in our community and creates more naturally affordable housing. It also means that we have more housing options to meet the needs of people in our community. My grandparents are coming towards the end of their lives, but they stayed in their home, probably their single family home, 4-bedroom single family home, probably a lot longer than they should have, because their only options after leaving that home were some kind of retirement community that was going to cost a whole bunch of money and would mean, like, frankly, kind of like moving to the end of their lives. They didn't really have an option to move to a smaller, maybe single-story house that was maybe 2/3 the size of their home, or into a condominium that met their needs, because those housing options just don't exist in my community. And like I said, those units that take less resources to construct. It also means that they're less energy intensive in the construction process, and they take less energy to heat and cool in their operation over time. It just takes a lot less energy to heat and cool a 900 square foot apartment or a 1,200 square foot condominium than it does to heat a 2,400 square foot single family home. So this is just a representation of what missing middle housing means. I think it's a word that people are talking about a lot. You have on the one hand detached single family homes, and on the other kind of extreme mid-rise or even high-rise apartment buildings. That missing middle housing is kind of everything in between. Everything from live work apartment buildings to courtyard apartments and duplexes. The basic idea is that we just need a broader diversity of housing options for people. So higher density and in these urban cores, it also helps us solve issues of transportation. It enables a variety of lower carbon transportation methods like walking and biking, but also different types of public transportation like buses or even municipal ride sharing systems. And this improves access to transportation for people who maybe don't have the financial resources to buy a car, or who just don't want to own a car. I've lived in cities. I lived in Toronto, where I went to grad school, and I had a car, but I never drove it. I took public transportation and I rode my bike everywhere, and it was incredible. And so I think it's not just about meeting the needs of people who don't have the resources, though that is critically important. It's also about providing ourselves and everybody really with the opportunity to get around in different ways. These types of lower carbon transportation methods, they reduce greenhouse gas production. Our car-centric society that is enabled and was in many ways created by this sprawl. It's as we've said, it's very intensive in the greenhouse gas production it puts out. And then just, walkable and bikeable streets improve quality of life. The places that I've lived where I can walk around, I can walk to the park, and I can walk down to the grocery store. There's just something really enjoyable about that. I feel connected to the place that I live. I see people in my neighborhood on a regular basis that I've gotten to know over time. And I think that makes life more full for people. So just I just wanted to share this this design concept called complete streets, which I think is a key part of this kind of zoning and land use, at least for transportation. In a lot of places throughout Monroe County, we have the kind of streets over here on the left that dominate. Right? There's 2 lanes on each side. The street takes up a huge amount of space, and really that that kind of the street is really just only for cars. Whereas on the right side, after a kind of complete streets redesign, you still have plenty of space for cars, but you also have elevated sidewalks and sidewalks that are separated from the road, from where cars are going to be, so that it's safe for pedestrians to move around. You have dedicated bike lanes going each way, which as a biker myself is really, really wonderful. And you still have space for cars to get around. So it's the kind of street that enables every mode of transportation that people want to take. And then the last kind of thing I'll touch on is that more density generally means more people moving through your community on a daily basis, which means more business, more opportunity for business. And really just it enables economic development to happen in your community. I live in the South Wedge right now, which is a neighborhood in the city of Rochester. It's right here. I think it's a great example of this. But the South Wedge is full of small businesses that people walk to all the time, that I walk to all the time. It has a grocery store right down the street from the kind of heart of the South Wedge called Abundance Food Co-op, which I'm sure many of you know about. But that's enabled through the fact that we have these higher density zoned neighborhood areas of the neighborhood, and that bring people into the neighborhood, that allow people to allow these businesses to have a customer base close by. So yeah, I've been talking about the South Wedge. I just wanted to share this example of the South Wedge's zoning map. You can see that we still have plenty of residential and even R1 low density residential, but that is not what it's still, it's still a huge portion, but it's not completely dominant in the neighborhood. We also have plenty of R2 or medium density residential, which is where I live. I live in this section of the neighborhood. It has two unit buildings. It has 4-unit buildings. It's got an old church that's being renovated into like a boutique hotel. It's got all sorts of different types of housing. We also have this large high density zones, like I think mid-rise apartment complex down here. And then what's really great about the South Wedge are these sections of C2 right here, which are community center or mixed use zoning, which is where you have in some cases, large apartment buildings, but in other cases, a lot of like mixed use buildings where you have a business on the ground floor and a series of apartments above. I'm sure many of you have driven down South Avenue in the South Wedge and seen all of this, but it's really great. Like I said, I love living in the South Wedge. I think it enables me to live a really style of life that I find a lot of meaning in, but that's also low carbon. I don't use my car most days of the week because I can bike to my office, I can bike to the grocery store, or walk. I've got friends that live in the neighborhood that I walk or bike to go and see, and I think that it's a great example of how this kind of higher density zoning that, again, doesn't totally eliminate single family zoning, but creates more space for other types of housing, other types of buildings and other, uses of space that is more low carbon, but also it helps improve quality of life. So I'll just end with this picture of South Ave. It's got these protected bike lanes, which I love. They're not as respected by drivers on the road as other, as I've seen other bike lanes in other cities. But it's still, it's way better than not having any bike lanes. And you have all these nice businesses, these mixed use properties up and down the road. And I know that there's plenty of other examples of communities like this throughout Rochester. I was just in the village of Fairport last week, which I have not really spent much time in, and I was getting similar kind of vibes from the village of Fairport. So it's just, it makes life, I think, better for me to live in a place like this. So I will stop there. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or reactions?
I have a thought.
Sure.
2 thoughts, actually. Number one is I think that this is great. I actually my wife and I actually moved into the city because this is the kind of lifestyle we wanted, and we're very happy at Park Avenue. There are all kinds of amenities we can walk to. And you just have to look outside your door to see the duplexes and the small apartment buildings and the mixed neighborhood of students and people of different races. It's great. But to be a pessimist, I mean, these zoning laws out in the suburbs were quite deliberately developed. They were deliberately developed, and people are not going to want to change because allowing medium and high density housing into the neighborhoods brings prices down. Plus, we have to remember that the reason that the zoning laws were put in place in the first place was to keep blacks out. And since we can't keep blacks out specifically anymore, one of the ways we can do it is to keep the prices of your real estate high. And therefore, that guarantees a homogeneous community, or at least as best you can. So I just curious about how you respond to those particular issues, which are going to be a problem with any attempt to zone in the suburbs.
Yeah, well, I don't know that bringing in more density does always contribute to lowering the value of property. I think in some cases, if it's done right, it would raise the value of the properties in that community, because it would, enable more economic development, make streets more walkable and bikeable. It just bring more people into the community, which would raise, the kind of overall tax value of property. But you may know more about that than I do, Alan. I was under the impression that it doesn't always. I think it creates fear because of what you're talking about. And I think the fear that your property values will be harmed is maybe a bit stronger than the reality of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like other folks have responses to that. So I'll let I saw Emily's hand up, and then Amber.
Hi, I had two comments, I guess. First was I thought it was interesting how South Wedge had like different R1s, R2s, R3s, because to me that was all high density. I mean, I just think that's interesting. So, because I'm just thinking shouldn't it be by land plot size to number of people you're putting in? And is that differ between city and suburb? Like, are they using different metrics to measure density?
Well, so I think the short answer is yes. I mean, the density in R1 sections of the city of Rochester really is about lot sizes, like you're saying. Like if you remember on that Grease map that I showed, let's see if I can find the numbers for it. They have a section of R1 zoning that is R1 single family residential, 44,000 square feet in terms of lot sizes. That's a significant
That
portion.
doesn't even make sense. Like, you're not building, it's not like how much you're packing in, it's just the size of the area.
Yes, yes.
That's not density,
Yeah.
like
Well,
you could have a large lot and then make it a set of townhouses, and that would still be yeah, I don't know, sorry.
yeah. You
It's my
could,
question,
no.
but not like, but that would be, yeah.
What
Sorry,
kind of
okay,
zoning rules include both lot size and what can be built on a lot?
They do. Yes.
okay. My second comment was that that complete streets makeover to me, with the bike lanes still on the street, to me is still not great. Not great because I believe that if we truly want people to cycle, we need to make sure we include people of all ages of different demographics. And I always think if you don't think a 10-year-old can ride that safely, that is not safe. So yeah, that's my
Yep.
opinion.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I agree.
That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. I think I saw Amber, and if anybody else wants to speak, you can just shoot your hand up or jump off mute after Amber.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of answer provide a response to Alan, your comment about the pushback, because that is something that is definitely happening in Fairport. And I would say that the event that we held the other night that you came to, or that you presided over, Graham, was fantastic because there were different folks in the room who kind of needed to hear that the economics of higher density is actually good for the community. And also, and so I think like continuing to drive that message home, and also continuing to drive the message home that like that our property value is going to go down if a homeowner comes in and runs down the property, not if we have rental properties with renters that come in. Like the statistics that that Bill, the speaker, he was sharing was just like that there's no evidence to support that. Like it is all about like anyone who owns the property caring about their place. So I just think like it's kind of incumbent upon us to share that message over and over and over again because people need to hear it. So that's just my 2 cents.
So I've got just something really quick.
Yeah.
I have friends who are looking to, move from single family homes, big yards, etc. Once you retire, sometimes you want to spend the time in your yard. Other times, oh my gosh, it's just more than you wanted to handle. But checking out things like condos and other areas, homeowner association fees, don't have a lot of control over. Costs get higher there. I mean, I like that we paid off our mortgage and I don't have monthly bills, towards something. We manage how we want to manage. So some of those things, I don't know the answer to it, but especially, you see even around the world, venture capitalists buying up homes and taking care of things and then skyrocketing prices. So it's some way to manage some of those things too, so that you're not going to a denser community, if you will, but then you have no control over your own personal costs because of how those things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, changing zoning to allow for more density is not going to solve the highly extractive real estate market that we have around the world. I hear you, Robin. Yeah, it's frustrating. It's a huge problem. The housing market and how unaffordable most types of housing are for most people. But if we only allow a few types of housing to be built, we're limiting ourselves and not giving ourselves the opportunity to build some of these other types of housing that I think will still be slightly more affordable than the large lot single family homes that we have. And I think about my parents, like, in what they want from me. They want me to move home. Like they'd be perfectly happy if I live right across the street from them. But that's not going to be financially possible for me because my town is dominated by single family homes, just like so many of these other communities are. And I don't make $150,000 a year to be able to, or more, to be able to afford one of those homes. So I think, to connect it back to some of these other conversations, I think that personally is one of the more powerful arguments to make at least it would be in my community, I think, about the need for more density is, you either have kids or aging parents who are going to need somewhere to live, and you probably want them to live in your town, in your community, nearby you. Well, given the housing options that you have because of the zoning laws in your community, they can't. They can't move back home and live near you unless they're doing really, really well, which if you are, that's great. But I don't think most people my age are, at least not that well.
So, Graham, I have just a few messages in the chat to point out. Pat
Sure.
said that Henrietta has cool multi-use mixed housing code, and you can access any town's code on specific topics by using the platform eCode. Matt said
Oh,
he's also used that eCode. Pat
very
also
cool.
mentioned an agrihood, houses closer together, leaving space for community gardens and nature.
Yeah.
And Heidi recommended the book Paved Paradise by Henry Grabar. Sorry if I'm saying that name wrong. It's
Mm.
in that book you learn about how parking zoning has adversely affected the creation of affordable housing all over the country. So I just wanted to point out those
Cool.
messages in the chat.
Thanks, Brady. Yeah, Katie.
So Color Penfield Green has started to wrestle with this issue and try to figure out how like we can take what we know is a massive issue, and so what do we do to turn that into action? And we're so lucky to have Ruhi Maker as one of our members. She's been a housing advocate for decades and follows national trends on what has worked, what doesn't work. And Graham, so much of what you're saying is like the things that would pull people in rather than turn people away, because we know that like everything we've done through this point has kind of built political capital, and we're pretty sure that like diving into this issue means we're going to be having some folks be upset with us and say, oh well, Color Penfield Green is this and we don't like them. So we're a little nervous about that. But when we have an opportunity, when like a developer comes in and says we want to build apartments or whatever, we make sure that we write letters of support. So that's like one really small issue that we can do. Like we're following planning board committee meetings and say like this is important, and also don't forget about smart growth. Like what are we doing for pedestrians? What are we doing to make this dangerous intersection better while you're building these apartments? And so there are like little things that I think teams can take on, because this feels so overwhelming. And like how do you shift a whole community? And I would love to like have this be a first of many conversations on this with this group, because it feels daunting. I'm sorry, I'm going to take one more minute and say that we have found amazing allies with local church groups who have been thinking about this for a long time, who had already had housing subcommittees that had kind of laid some groundwork, and they are trusted in the community. So reach out and find out if local church groups have housing subcommittees.
Thank you, Katie. If Graham has any response, I just want to, before he responds, make sure we thank Graham for being here and